Hey, I'm Allison from Learning at the Primary Pond, and in this video, I'm going to explain how teaching routines very carefully and very intentionally can actually help you cut down on those unwanted behaviors in the classroom that can distract from learning and even be unsafe at times. So in this video, I'm going to get really detailed. I'm not just going to tell you, oh yeah, teach procedures and routines, because probably most of us have heard that already. I'm actually going to get really detailed and show you step by step what that can look like. But before we dive in, if you haven't subscribed to my channel yet, make sure to do that now, and then also hit the little bell so that you're notified every time I post a brand new video about teaching literacy or other teaching topics, but mostly I focus on K2 and K2 literacy. Okay, so first of all, what do I mean when I say the word routine? Well, a routine is just a sequence of actions that regularly followed. So this could be something as simple as having the kids hang up their backpacks, or how to get out a pencil box. Or it could include academic procedures like, how to complete a word sort during phonics, or how to turn and talk to answer a question with your partner and make sure that both partners participate. What do you do when you're finished writing a story during your writing block, right? What do the kids do during all of these things? All of these are routines, and actually the school day is filled with them, right? This is kind of how we function. So I have a question for you. We're going to talk about teaching routines and how long you should typically take, but how many weeks, if you think about the beginning of the school year, do you spend on practicing routines? Do you spend 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks? Let me know in the comments how many weeks you typically spend on practicing routines. Now, in my opinion, from my perspective, the first 4 to 6 weeks of school should be really focused on practicing routines. Now, this doesn't mean that we are literally just practicing all day long how to line up, or how to put our pencil boxes away. That's not the only stuff that's happening. There's also instruction taking place. But the mindset that I kind of have is that, instruction will take place, but it might be maybe a little bit less than when we're fully up and running, and I just slow things down. And I want to be flexible, because if my instruction on a routine isn't working, or we need to redo something, I just want to have that mindset of this is okay. This is time well spent. I can be flexible. We can be flexible and spend the time where we really need to. Now, why do I spend so much time on this, right? Why do I have that mindset? Why don't I just go into the school year instruction content, right? Well, the reason is that when you spend this time up front, it ends up paying off dividends in the future. It ultimately gives you more instructional time, because as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, you're not spending so much time on managing student behaviors, or just making sure that they're safe, because you still have to do that, but most of that is out of the way because you've done such a nice job of teaching routines and procedures at the beginning of the school year. I've also noticed that when there's less gray area for students when it comes to routines, they know exactly what they're supposed to do and how to do it, it just creates that sense of security, and it leaves less room for things like disagreements and arguments. If there's more uncertainty about how they're supposed to do things, then it just it creates opportunities for that. As I'm sure you've seen, if you've ever had the experience of telling all your kids to go line up and they were pushing and shoving and whatnot, right? We have to be very specific, especially because, we're focusing on K2 kiddos here. We might assume that even the ones who've been in school before can do something, and they probably can, but again, the less gray area, I think, the better. So we are setting ourselves up for success at the beginning of the school year, or really whenever you're ready to start teaching routines. If you've already started the school year and you're whoa, things are not going so smoothly, it's never too late to walk it back. I mean, even when I do teach routines very thoroughly at the beginning of the school year, I still have to walk it back sometimes. That's just, in my opinion, kind of the nature of teaching little ones. So anyway, that brings me to my next point of how do we actually do this? How do we actually teach routines? Okay, so when I'm planning to teach students a routine, or lots of routines, as may be the case at the beginning of the school year, I want to think about a couple of things. Number one, what is the ideal goal? When I envision in my head this routine running smoothly, What do I see happening? What do I hear happening or not hear happening? Like, what's going on? What am I trying to get to? It's like setting the destination for a GPS, right? If you don't know where you're going, you're not going to get there. So we have to be really clear on that. So then once we know what the ultimate goal is, we have to break it down into like minute steps. And I'll show you an example of exactly what this could look like in a moment, but we need to get really like into the nitty gritty, really detailed. Number 3, what should students and you as the teacher be doing during the routine? And then number 4, I think this is number 4, what could potentially go wrong or be a disruption? And this one is huge because as much as we wish that daily classroom life was predictable and the kids would just do exactly what we laid out for them, that's just not the nature of teaching. So we really need to anticipate possible problems. And also when we anticipate those problems and we teach the kids to solve them, that creates greater independence for them, which is overall just a good thing. So those are the types of questions that I ask myself when I am preparing to teach a routine. And, you know, the example that I'm going to go through next is non-academic. It's just literally like what is going on in the classroom during, lining up is what we're going to do. So it's non-academic, but you could also apply this process to an academic routine. For example, what do kids do when they finish writing a story during writing workshop or, some of those other examples that I mentioned earlier, because academic routines are significant as well. But the example that I'm going to give now is how to line up. And this could be for lunch. It could be to go to a specialist class. It could be to go to recess. It could even be, because we use this procedure in case of emergency, it could even be for a fire drill or an actual fire, or, you got to get out of the classroom quickly, right? So this kind of routine needs to happen smoothly and safely. It's so easy, especially for little ones, to want to like run to the line, or, maybe they push each other out of the way, or they cut in line and then they get upset, or somebody gets hurt. So it's a very basic procedure or routine that you go through every single day. But the kids have to know how to do it safely, and they have to know how to do it expediently, especially in case of emergency. So lining up. Now, I have done this different ways, right? Like sometimes when we line up, like especially with kindergarten or first grade, it might be like a little, like phonological awareness activity, or I'm saying like, if your name starts with the S sound, go line up. So there might be, there's other ways that I have kids line up, but I do think it's important to have kind of like a standard procedure that can be done quickly if you need to be. So again, this is not the only way to have kids line up. We're just doing this for the sake of talking about like how granular and detailed you can get when you're teaching a routine. Okay, so our ideal goal is that the kids will line up in an orderly fashion, efficiently, quickly, and also quietly. Because if they're not being quiet, you waste a lot of time trying to get their attention, then you're late to lunch, blah, blah, blah. Plus, in the case of emergency, right? We want to make sure that they can get there quietly too. Okay, so now let's break down what steps are going to be needed in order to get the kids to this point. So step number 1 is that I may show hand signals for students to just literally show them how to stand up if they happen to be like in their seats, right? Or at their tables, at their desks, whatever. Might be different, of course, if the kids are on the rug. But for example, I may hold up just number 1. And when I hold up number 1, the students will know that they need to stand up from their desks, okay? When I hold up number 2, then the students move behind their chairs. This is a good one because you want them to like push it in, breaking it down really granularly, right? We don't want anybody flying over chairs and, tripping, whatever. So number 2 would be the students move behind their chairs. Number 3, they push in their chairs, okay? So they move behind, then they push in. And then number 4, the students turn to face wherever the classroom door is. So some kids, if you're at tables, they may be facing different ways, or everybody may just not be facing the door, but everybody needs to face the door, right? So I'm literally holding up 1, 2, 3, 4. So that can be really helpful because you're breaking it down just step by step, okay? So then next up, when I say go, or when I say go ahead, each row, assuming you have rows, will move, it could be tables too, will move in a line toward the end of their row, right? And then they stop and they're still in the line, okay? I think we're on step 3. Then you kind of got, so everybody has the rows, right? And the rows are lined up. Step 3 would be for the back row to continue walking toward the door to get in line. The third row, or whatever number row you have that's before them, they go in their line, they fill in, and then you keep on going until all the rows have lined up. So that is very very methodical. But again, I just wanted to show you that to give you a sense of how important it is to break down things step by step. The other question that I talked about, thinking about, was what should students and the teacher be doing during the routine? Well, number 1, we talked about the kids being quiet, eyes on the teacher, waiting for the signals. If you do those hand signals, hands should be at their sides to themselves when they're walking. And the student's ears should also be ready to listen for those cue words like go ahead or whatever you say. And then me as the teacher, I'm just scanning the room to make sure that all of the students are following directions and that everyone is being safe, right? Okay, so our next question is what could potentially go wrong or create some kind of disruption? We want to plan for that. Okay, well, if a student doesn't push in their chair, another student won't be able to get by or they may possibly trip. So we need to teach the kids, number 1, to look out for this and what to do if it happens. Another one, if students aren't walking, or if they're not just looking in front of them while they're walking, they could tumble into another person. You know how the kids will kind of turn their heads and be talking to somebody? We want eyes forward so that we don't have any domino effects or collisions. And then if students aren't watching the teacher for hand signals, then we're not going to have this whole thing running smoothly, right? Because they won't know what to do. They'll be out of order. They'll be missing the line. So it's a lot for one procedure. But again, this is something that, on a daily basis, you don't want to spend hours and hours just trying to get the kids to line up. And if there's an emergency, we got to be able to do this quickly and quietly, right? So I would teach this by doing more teacher talk up front, more thinking aloud and instruction than I eventually want to do. Eventually I want the routine to run just really smoothly, 1, 2, 3, 4, right? And then go. So it should be really quick, but at first you got to do a little bit more talking. And then if we're practicing this, right? So I'm explaining and we're practicing this, but if the practice isn't going well, I would just have them redo it, and I'd say, whoops, that wasn't our best attempt. Let's start over. Let's try to do it again. Or, I know we can do better than this. Let's go back. Let's do it again. This comes into play those first 4 to 6 weeks of school, like I mentioned, where I think it's important to have a slower pace and to, when you're planning instruction, plan a little less than you eventually hope to get to, because you want to have that flexibility to say, oh, our lining up didn't go well, let's go back and redo it. And yeah, you need to go back and redo it at any point in the year, not just the first 4 to 6 weeks. However, you can anticipate that it's going to take kids a little bit longer to get it at the beginning. So that's why you want to plan for that flexibility. Now, speaking of slowing things down, as students are learning the step-by-step procedures, which with that, lining up example was very much 1, 2, 3, 4, very specific, that's going to go a little bit more slowly at first, and that is totally normal. You're also going to wait for 100% compliance, so everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing. And then as students are getting the hang of it, you can try to speed it up, obviously in a safe way. We don't want anyone running, but maybe you use a timer and the kids are, trying to beat their own time. Yesterday, it took us 1 minute, 3 seconds to line up for lunch. If we can do it faster than that, then you earn 2 extra minutes of recess or whatever is going to be fun or interesting to them. So while you're practicing too, I really think it's important to point out specific kids and name what they're doing correctly. I often lose my voice at the beginning of the school year, which I don't love, but the reason I tend to lose my voice is because I'm pointing out, oh my goodness, I loved how Jamie pushed in her chair as quietly as possible. Or, Juan has his eyes looking forward. He's watching the line so he doesn't trip. Just that positive reinforcement, pointing out what they're doing correctly. I also sometimes will have them model things that could go wrong, like scenarios like, what do you do if you notice another classmate's chair wasn't pushed in? Like, are you supposed to yell at them or grab them? No, just push it in, right? Help out your friend. So going through some of those scenarios can be helpful as well. All right, well, I know that was a lot of information, but I hope it's helpful to see how you can really break things down. It can feel like a lot, especially if you're a new teacher, when you're like, oh my gosh, I have to do that for every single routine. But A, I promise it's time well spent. That will give you more instructional time throughout your school year. And B, when you figure this out, you can just rinse and repeat year after year and even throughout the year, right? When you have to like reteach routines. So it is absolutely time well spent, and I hope that this was helpful. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.